Japan builds better, warns faster, and drills harder than any country on Earth. And its own government just released an official projection saying none of it is enough to save 298,000 of its own people. 298,000 dead? That is not a worst-case scenario. That is the Japanese government's central estimate, published in March 2025, compiled by the country's leading seismologists, and delivered to every prefecture government along the Pacific coast. It accounts for every seawall ever built, every evacuation tower, every building retrofitted, every drill conducted, every warning system installed, all of it already in the math, and the math still comes out at 298,000. Here is what makes this impossible to look away from. Japan is not an unprepared country caught off guard by a crisis it never saw coming. Japan saw this coming. Japan has been seeing it coming for 80 years. It has spent more money, more political capital, and more engineering genius preparing for this single event than any government in history has ever spent preparing for anything. And the country that did all of that looked at its own preparation and issued a number that should stop you cold. Not if, when. And when it comes, 298,000 people die in a country that did everything right. So what happens to the rest of the world that did not? To understand what the Nankai Trough actually is, you have to picture the Pacific Ocean floor southwest of Japan, two tectonic plates grinding against each other at roughly 5 centimeters per year. That sounds like nothing. Over a century, it is everything. The Philippine Sea Plate is sliding beneath the Eurasian Plate, and at the boundary between them, the rock does not simply slip, it bends. It compresses. It loads like a spring pulled tighter and tighter with every passing decade until the stress exceeds what the rock can physically hold. Then the fault snaps. The seafloor lurches upward by several meters in seconds. The water above it surges outward in every direction. What follows is what the Japanese have spent centuries naming: the Nankai Megathrust earthquake. This fault is not random. That is the part that makes it uniquely terrifying. It operates on a cycle between 90 and 200 years per event, and it has done so at least 12 documented times in the last 1,300 years. The 684 Hakuho earthquake, the 1,707 Hoi earthquake, the 1,944 and 1,946 pair, each one devastating, each one followed, eventually, by the next. The last full release was 80 years ago. Japan's own Earthquake Research Committee puts the probability of the next megaquake at 70 to 80% within the next 30 years. Nobody knows exactly when. What they know is that the spring has been loading since 1946, and it has not released. But here is what the history books reveal that the current projections do not fully capture. In 1707, something happened that had never been recorded before and has not been recorded since. Every segment of the Nankai Trough ruptured simultaneously, all 900 kilometers. A magnitude 8.6 earthquake, the largest in Japanese history until 2011, unleashed a tsunami that killed more than 5,000 people and rewrote coastlines across the Pacific. And then, 49 days later, Mount Fuji erupted. Not a coincidence. The stress changes from 900 kilometers of seafloor snapping upward had compressed the magma chambers beneath the volcano, triggering the most explosive eruption Japan had seen in centuries. The last time every segment of this fault broke at once, it lit up an icon visible from space 49 days later. The 2025 government projection does not include that scenario in its 298,000 figure. It was already overwhelming without it. Japan did not simply accept its geography and wait for the worst. The country built, over decades, what most seismologists agree is the most sophisticated earthquake defense infrastructure ever constructed. Every solution was designed to address a specific failure identified in a previous disaster, and every solution had a limit nobody wanted to say out loud. After the 1896 Meiji Sanriku tsunami killed 22,000 people, Japan began building seawalls. After 2011, when waves topped those seawalls and killed nearly 20,000 anyway, Japan built bigger ones. The seawall at Fudai village in Iwate Prefecture, a 15 5-meter wall. whose construction the local mayor had fought for through years of mockery and budget battles, famously protected the town when every neighboring community was inundated. Japan pointed to Fudai as proof that the engineering worked. Then engineers looked at the Nankai projections and did the math. The projected tsunami for Kuroshio town in Kochi Prefecture is 34.4 meters, 112 feet, more than twice the height of the waves that destroyed Fukushima. There is no seawall that tall. There never will be. The physics do not permit it. The economics do not permit it. The geography does not permit it. And Kuroshio town is not an outlier. Along the Nankai coastline, 13 prefectures face waves exceeding 10 meters. Some face waves exceeding 20. The seawall was never going to be the answer. Japan knew it. They built them anyway because partial protection is better than nothing. But partial protection against a 34.4-meter wave is not protection. It is delay. Here is the part that nobody in the Japanese government wants to say out loud. The communities that face the worst projections are the same communities that built the most economic activity on the coast over the last 50 years. Fishing ports, industrial zones, tourism infrastructure, all of it constructed after the damage projections were already understood. All of it built by developers and local governments that had access to the same fault data the seismologists were publishing. The seawall is the answer Japan chose instead of the harder answer, which was to stop building the thing the seawall was trying to protect. After the 1995 Kobe earthquake exposed catastrophic weaknesses in older construction, Japan implemented sweeping seismic retrofit requirements. The earthquake resistance rate for houses rose from 79% in 2008 to 90% in 2023. The engineering works for the buildings that were retrofitted. The 2025 projection still estimates 73,000 deaths from building collapses alone, because not every building was retrofitted. Because old buildings in depopulating coastal towns are not economic priorities. Because the fault is 900 kilometers long and aimed at where Osaka, Nagoya, Shizuoka, and dozens of coastal cities have been growing for decades. Then there is the warning system, the crown jewel of Japanese earthquake preparedness. The network detects the fast-moving P waves that precede destructive shaking and fires automated alerts to more than 100 million mobile phones in seconds. During the 2011 earthquake, bullet trains across the region received automatic stop signals and decelerated before the worst shaking arrived. Not a single Shinkansen derailed. The system is real. The system works. And in the scenarios where the Nankai Trough triggers a tsunami in places like Shizuoka City, the first wave of 1 meter or higher arrives within 2 minutes of the earthquake stopping. 2 minutes. Not from the warning, from the moment the ground stops shaking. For 215,000 of the 298,000 projected dead, the warning does not matter. The water arrives before the body can respond. Japan built every solution it could build. Each one works. None of them is enough. The morning of the 8th of August, 2024, started like any other summer day in western Japan. Then the ground moved off the coast of Miyazaki Prefecture, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, not a megaquake, not even close to one. But it happened at the western edge of the Nankai Trough subduction zone and inside the Japan Meteorological Agency's monitoring center. The expert panel began running calculations that no Japanese institution had ever been required to make public before. By evening, they had their answer. For the first time in the entire recorded history of Japan, not after Kanto in 1923, not after Kobe in 1995, not even after 2011, the agency issued a formal megaquake advisory. The probability of a subsequent magnitude 8 or 9 event was relatively higher than usual. Not a prediction, a statistical elevation above normal, and that was enough. What happened next revealed something about Japan that no earthquake drill had ever captured. Supermarket shelves emptied within hours, not in the impact zone, everywhere. Tokyo ran out of bottled water, dried noodles, and portable toilets. The Prime Minister canceled his diplomatic tour and flew home. Coastal towns activated emergency operations centers within the day. A nation of 125 million people converted a statistical footnote about elevated earthquake probability into immediate behavioral change at scale in a single afternoon. Yoneko Oshima was standing near a major Tokyo train station when a reporter found her. She said what she was feeling with the specific directness of someone who has been living with this number for years. "It's scary," she said. "They say there's a 70 to 80% chance in the next 30 years, but it could be tomorrow." She had just bought a portable toilet. Her husband was diabetic. He needed medication after every meal and could not go without water. She was making a list. She was trying to have everything at hand. That is what 298,000 deaths in the abstract looks like when it becomes personal. A woman near a Tokyo train station running a survival checklist, buying a portable toilet because she understands the math, and she has done the accounting for her own family inside it. 1 week later, the Japan Meteorological Agency announced that no abnormalities had been observed in the Nankai Trough. The advisory was lifted. Citizens could return to normal life. Japan exhaled. Here is what the relief did not change. The probability of a Nankai megaquake in the next 30 years did not move. It remained at 70 to 80%. The fault did not relax. The energy stored in the locked plate interface did not diminish. Nothing about the physical reality had changed in any meaningful way. 1 week of national alertness had ended. The thing it was alert to was still there, loading at 5 centimeters per year, the same way it had been loading every year since 1946. That false exhale lasted 7 months. In March 2025, the Japanese government released its first revised damage projections since 2012. The new numbers incorporated a decade of updated research, higher precision topographical data, lessons from the 2024 Noto Peninsula earthquake. They reflected more seismic-resistant buildings and improved tsunami evacuation facilities. They should have been significantly better. The projected death toll came down from 323,000 to 298,000. The headline looked like progress. Then, engineers read the fine print. The areas expected to flood had expanded by 30% compared to the previous estimate. Higher precision terrain data had revealed that water reaches further than anyone had modeled. The number of people who would need to evacuate within the first week climbed from 9.5 million to 12.3 million. And there was a new category that had not existed in the 2012 projection: disaster-related deaths. People who survive the earthquake and tsunami but die in evacuation, shelters from deteriorating health, from lack of medicine, from cold, from the collapse of any semblance of normal care. The range for those additional deaths was 26,000 to 52,000. The 52,000 figure alone would be more than 13 times the total shelter deaths from the 2011 earthquake. The government's own stated target had been to reduce the projected death toll by 80% by the end of fiscal year 2023. The 2025 projection confirmed they had not come close. Professor Emeritus Nobuo Fukuwa of Nagoya University, who chaired the working group that compiled the new numbers, was asked why the seawall investments and evacuation improvements had not reduced the figure more dramatically. He was direct. Even when accounting for all current countermeasures, the number of casualties was not significantly reduced. The fault is too long, the wave is too tall, the window is too short. 298,000 is what you get after doing everything right for decades. It is not the floor. It may not even be the ceiling. And here is the accountability question nobody in Tokyo is answering publicly. The Japanese government set a target in 2013 to reduce the projected death toll by 80% within 10 years. That deadline passed in 2023. The 2025 projection confirmed they had not come close. Not 80%, not 60%, not 40%. The death toll came down by roughly 7.5% over a decade of spending, and the flood zone expanded. In any other context, a hospital that missed its survival targets by that margin, an infrastructure project that delivered 7.5% of its promised results, someone would be asked to explain what happened to the rest. Nobody in the Japanese government has been asked that question in a way that requires a public answer. The number sits in the projection documents. The target sits in the 2013 policy papers. The gap between them sits in a silence that 298,000 people cannot afford. The number 298,000 lives inside a town of fewer than 10,000 people on the Pacific coast of Kochi Prefecture in Shikoku, Kuroshio Town. Fishing community. Agricultural. Close to the coast, close to the sea, close to the fault. And officially, since 2012, the place on Earth where the Nankai Megaquake hits first and hits hardest. The official tsunami projection for Kuroshio is 34.4 meters. At that height, the first wave overtops everything the town has built by a margin that is not close. The local government's own assessment estimates 2,300 deaths, roughly 1 in 4 residents, gone before the water recedes. In 2012, when those numbers first circulated, the town nearly surrendered to resignation. What was the point? What could any drill, any tower, any canned food purchase accomplish against a wall of water 112 feet tall? The community held meetings. People cried. Some talked about leaving. Then the mayor, Onishi Katsuya, made a decision that changed what the rest of Japan would later call the model for living with an impossible number. He called Toshitaka Katada. Katada was the disaster prevention expert whose behavioral approach had produced what became known as the miracle of Kamaishi, 570 schoolchildren who escaped the 2011 tsunami because they had drilled the specific route. So many times that muscle memory carried them to safety even when roads were blocked and adults froze. His philosophy was not about infrastructure. It was about the 90 seconds between the ground stopping and the moment you need to be running. The seawall could not be built tall enough. What could change was whether every single resident knew exactly what their body was going to do before their mind caught up. The town built 250 evacuation routes, 6 tsunami evacuation towers, drills not annually but continuously, block by block, nursing home by nursing home, school by school. A canned food project where the packaging showed a running figure and the number 34M, the wave height, stamped on every can in every household as a daily reminder of the arithmetic of their lives. Here is what the miracle of Kamaishi actually proved. It did not prove that preparation can stop a 3-4 meter tsunami. It proved that preparation can change who is standing in its path when it arrives. The children survived because they were already running before the water came, not because the wave was smaller, because the muscle memory was there when the conscious mind was still processing. Kuroshio is trying to manufacture that same muscle memory for an entire town. Whether it works depends on one factor nobody can control. Whether the earthquake strikes at noon on a weekday, when the evacuation routes are populated with people who have drilled them, or at 2 inches the morning in winter, when 298,000 is not a projection but a countdown. Here is the part that nobody wants to say out loud, because saying it requires accepting there is no engineering solution large enough to close the gap. The limit is 2 minutes. In Shizuoka City, one of the largest urban centers in the Nankai Trough impact zone, the government's own projections show a tsunami of 1 meter or higher arriving within 2 minutes of the earthquake ending. Not from the warning, from the moment the ground stops shaking. For elderly residents, for anyone with limited mobility, for every person on a ground floor within a kilometer of the coast, 2 minutes is not survivable. The water arrives before the body can respond. That is not a solvable problem. That is physics. The mathematical limit is identical. 298,000 deaths is what Japan's government projects will occur, accounting for all the seismic reinforcement, all the evacuation towers, all the seawalls, all the drills. Japan set a target in 2013 to cut that number by 80% within 10 years. The 2025 projections confirmed they failed to reach it. Not because the effort was insufficient, because the fault is too long, the wave is too tall, and there are too many people living too close to the coastline for too many decades of economic growth to undo quickly enough. Japan produces roughly 10% of global manufacturing output. The corridor between Tokyo and Osaka, running directly through the Nankai impact zone, carries the Tokaido Shinkansen and the industrial backbone of the world's third largest economy. The 2025 projections estimate damage to roads at 43,200 locations and railways at 18,700 simultaneously. Kansai International Airport, the primary air cargo hub for Western Japan, sits on an artificial island directly within the projected tsunami inundation zone. The island was completed in 1994. The Nankai Trough damage projections had been part of Japanese government planning since the 1970s. The decision to build a $20 billion airport on a man-made island in the exact zone where government scientists had already modeled catastrophic tsunami inundation was not made in ignorance. Chubu Centrair International Airport faces the same exposure. The day the fault breaks is not just Japan's worst day. It is a supply chain disruption that propagates through every economy that depends on Japanese industrial output. A 2018 study estimated total economic losses over 20 years at $11.3 trillion, 10 times the damage from 2011. That number was calculated before the 2025 projections expanded the flood zone by 30%. And then there is Mount Fuji. In 1707, when the last full rupture of the Nankai Trough sent stress changes through 900 kilometers of crust, the magma chambers beneath Fuji compressed and triggered an eruption 49 days later. After 2011, research confirmed that the Tohoku earthquake measurably increased internal pressure in Fuji's magma system. A Nankai megaquake, hitting closer and harder, interacts with that same system. Nobody is predicting a certain eruption. The 298,000 figure does not include one. It was already overwhelming without it. The warning system is real, the evacuation towers are real, the drills are real, the retrofitted buildings are real. Japan has done everything that can be done, and the number barely moved. But here is the part that should make you angry, not just scared. Securing furniture to walls, one of the most basic preparedness measures known to reduce deaths from falling objects during shaking, costs almost nothing. It requires no government program, no infrastructure budget, no engineering. It requires a drill, a strap, and 20 minutes. It was implemented in only 36% of Japanese households as of 2022 after decades of public campaigns. Densely built urban areas requiring fire mitigation, where post-earthquake fires spread block to block through ruptured gas lines in the minutes after shaking stops, had completed only 61% of required work as of 2024. These are not the failures of a government that ran out of money or a country that ran out of engineers. These are the failures of individual behavior that no amount of policy can fully override. And the people who have not secured their furniture, who live in the unrenovated buildings, who cannot reach an evacuation tower in 2 minutes, they are not randomly distributed across Japan. They are concentrated in the oldest neighborhoods, in the most depopulated coastal towns, in the lowest income communities. The Nankai Megaquake will not kill 298,000 people randomly. It will kill 298,000 people in a very specific pattern, and that pattern follows the geography of poverty and age as precisely as it follows the geography of the fault itself. What Japan has bought with decades of investment is not safety. It is distance between 298,000 and something worse. Every seawall, every evacuation tower, every drill represents seconds and meters of additional margin. In Kuroshio Town, where the mayor's zero death toll campaign has trained every resident in the muscle memory of escape, that margin will save thousands of lives. That is not nothing, but the water is still coming. Japan built the most sophisticated earthquake response system in the history of human civilization. The building codes are stricter than anywhere on Earth. The warning system reaches 100 million phones in seconds. The evacuation routes are mapped and drilled. The seawalls are standing, and the government that built all of it released an official projection in March 2025 that said 298,000 people will die. The fault has been loading since 1946. The probability is 70 to 80% in the next 30 years. 298,000 is the central estimate, with every favorable assumption built in daytime, functional roads, working warning systems, drills remembered. Yoneko Oshima said it plainly, standing at a Tokyo train station. buying a portable toilet, doing the math for her diabetic husband. It could be tomorrow. The seawalls are standing, the evacuation routes are mapped. The drills have been run. 298,000 is not a prediction. It is a direction.